Do you ever have a great pairing like Diet Coke and chicken tenders?
Or a Whopper and an orange soda?
And it just makes each part taste different, maybe even better than they would on their own? Or worse, potentially?
Yes.
This is Juxtapose, the podcast where we bring you, well, usually two tasty pieces of art, but we're bringing you something a little different this time to see what they're like together.
I'm your host, B. Forkin.
And I'm Sarah Peacher. Let's dig in.
Okay, so for the last 2 seasons, we have brought things to the podcast that were very much focused on art and artists who we were each individually excited about. But we decided to mix things up for this episode by bringing artists that we are not excited about. So different vibes. On that note, today I am bringing an Insta poet, Whitney Hanson. I first discovered this poet on Instagram because at the time she had 2 million followers, and I was shocked that a poet could have that many followers. Now, however, she has something like over 3 million. I do feel weird like talking trash about someone. So I'm going to start with some things to admire about this person. But first, a couple of facts about her. So she is the author of a few collections of poetry, Home, Harmony, and Climate. She first self-published her work and then focused on building an audience on social media. After building this audience, her self-published book was later acquired and resold by a major publisher. And I think now she is like a full-time social media, maybe not influencer, but presence and a writer. Thematically, her work deals with grief and loss. And aesthetically, I would say her writing is really direct and sort of So what's to admire about Whitney Hanson? I like that she has a very large audience and that this driven audience is engaging with sort of contemporary poetry. I think that she's very intentional about her social media presence. It looks like it has like a very specific vibe. I like that she's using an art form like poetry to grapple with very human and difficult things like grief and loss. So all of that is great. And as a poet myself, I think I could take notes from her and the social media presence department. So what is not to like? I think my biggest issue with her and her work in general is that it makes a lot of like big, sweeping, generalized statements that manifest as truisms. Like, here is a quote that I found. There are some people who are just meant to be a sunrise for you. So there's a few more quotes, and I just feel like the work is like too Hallmark card-ish and doesn't delve deep enough into the specific and into the personal that would really edge it closer to vulnerability. I feel like a lot of the writing are just like feel good quotes like that you'd see on Instagram, which I get there's a place for that, but I'm disappointed to see this kind of work be catapulted into mainstream success because I feel like readers deserve more than a Hallmark card. And a lot of the work is also very life advice heavy, which I'm sure resonates with, well, I guess 3 million people, but I'm looking for a little bit more personal grit. I noticed on her social media, she does like a lot of like close-up shots of her face, which I think creates like a kind of intimacy with a viewer. And then she reads these kinds of poems that hint at vulnerable, that hint at intimate, but I don't feel like they ever fully land there because there's just a lot that is missing for me. So here's a few more quotes. It is never selfish to take care of your heart. If you need to move, then move. If you need to stay, then stay. Don't let anyone else dictate where your peace lands. I don't disagree with what she has to say. I guess I just prefer work that's more image heavy, where the image does the work. And with writing in general, like words have to work really hard than they have to work a lot harder than other mediums because all a poet has or a writer has to work with is language. And so when a poem is successful, just using the crafts of poetry, including a traditional form or line breaks or word choice, it's like really thrilling because it took a lot of work to land there. So my primary issue with her is that I feel like her work doesn't work hard enough. And I don't know, like maybe I'm not being fair to her because, she's had like a lot of material success. And what she has to say, I mean, I don't disagree with it. Like some of the truisms are maybe people need to hear that. I just don't feel like I can celebrate it as a successful work of poetry. I really feel bad because like a lot of people love it. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fair for people to love these things. But I do want to start with something similar to what you did, B. I really like that you included things that you admire. So I would say that I also admire about Taylor Swift that she's grown this following over the years, even if it is a bit cult-like. And her writing really does speak to young women's feelings in a way that like many have not been able to find elsewhere. And I really respect the Swifties out there who have grown up with her music and found hope and inspiration through it. And I don't discount the power of that whatsoever. I've seen it bring a lot of young women together in really beautiful ways. I also like have specific songs that I really enjoy in specific albums. So some of the stuff I like most of hers includes the song Cruel Summer, which actually, fun fact, this was brought up when Cruel Summer started to pick up traction again and get more streams. But it was actually written with an artist that I love and admire a ton, Annie Clark, who is also known as Saint Vincent, which I would argue is what makes it so great. It was originally written probably mainly by Saint Vincent in collaboration with Jack Antonoff and then got passed off to Taylor Swift later on. So, of course, Taylor Swift gave it a full life and brought it to her audience, which is beautiful. But I think it's important to highlight that it had its roots in someone who's a little more obscure, who I really love, to sort of like back that up more too. The melody and lyricism, especially really highlight Annie Clark's hand in the creation of the song. There's rumor that she also plays guitar on the track. I don't know how true that is. I didn't do too much of a deep dive into that because I was trying to focus on Taylor Swift here. But I also really vibed with Fearless back in the day. I do have very distinct memories of dancing around in my friend's room, lip syncing in the mirror, coming up with like choreography to the songs on that record. So I hope that our listeners know that as much as I'm going to, pick apart Taylor Swift, it is from a place of, having that nostalgia and having that respect for what she does bring to the table here. Probably my least favorite of her albums is Reputation, but more recently, the Tortured Poets department was also really rough. One of my main qualms with her songwriting is just a lot of overdone similes and metaphors. She really likes to try to, create a whole world and do a lot of world building through the lyrics, but sometimes it gets a bit heavy with all of that going on. And reviewers have often compared her to, incredible writers like Bob Dylan, who has what is it? Is it a Pulitzer Prize for
Or
like
did
a
he win the
literature Nobel Prize in literature?
He won some big prize.
And then also Joni Mitchell. A lot of people compare her to Joni Mitchell. I don't really see that comparison come through. Maybe in some of the content or like the storytelling methods are similar, but Taylor's syntax, rhythm, and melodies are really like quite different from both Dylan and Mitchell. But that aside, let's talk through Reputation and a bit of Tortured Poets department, which is where I mainly have seen her work fail to live up to expectations. Tortured Poets department is very long-winded, so even the shortened version of it is 16 songs, which is a bit long for an album. I mean, we did just talk about Dragon New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You, which has a lot of tracks on it as well. But maybe if you haven't listened to that episode, maybe go check that out, because we did discuss like a long album, but it didn't fall short for me. So we talk a little bit about why that's the case. And then the anthology version of Tortured Poets Department is 31 tracks long. And yes, I did listen to the whole thing. It really started to feel like instead of fully like crafting and selecting the best from a series of drafts over the course of time that she was recording for this album, she sort of just shoved every song that she made leading up to its release just into the world as soon as she could. And then I'm going to get real roasty here, but I think it's also, frankly, pretty boring sonically in its production. Jack Antonoff has been working with a lot of different pop girlies over the course of the past few years, and each time he tends to make things that sound very similar. So we hear that sound a lot everywhere, and it makes things feel very like flat. Like I'm not hearing anything new or exciting, or there's no element of surprise there. There's also some lyrics that I have a strong distaste for, especially one that a lot of people were talking about when Tortured Poets Department first came out, where she says, quote, "My friends used to play a game where we would pick a decade we wished we could live in instead of this. I'd say the 1830s, but without all the racists and getting married off for the highest bid."
Yikes.
Yikes. Yikes. Other honorable mentions for worst lyrics include I can't believe I'm gonna read this. Nobody like clip this or anything and use it later, but quote, "Touch me while your bros play Grand Theft Auto."
Ew.
So that's Tortured Poets Department. I suffice it to say did not enjoy that, except for maybe some of the laughs I got out of the lyrics. To turn to Reputation, I read her Time interview, which had some really interesting quotes from her about this particular album. And I'm just going to sort of read some of the selections from the Time interview that I thought were interesting. So, quote, she remembers Reputation being met with uproar and skepticism. "I thought that moment of backlash was going to define me negatively for the rest of my life," she says. She had also satisfied her record deal with Borchetta and knew she wanted out. "The molecular chemistry of that old label was that every creative choice I wanted to make was second-guessed," she says. "I was really overthinking these albums." And to respond to that quote, it was interesting to hear that because I definitely feel like in Reputation, especially, things felt like overthought in ways. Like some of the songs felt like overworked and like not as much her. Like I feel like she started to return to form a little bit when she moved towards like Folklore and Evermore albums, where she was at least returning to more of like a folky sound. And that really let her sort of lean into where she wanted to go with her own direction with things. There's more from the Time interview. She tells me about revisiting Reputation, which is perhaps the most charged era in the tour. It's a goth punk moment of female rage at being gaslit by an entire social structure, she says, laughing. "I think a lot of people see it and they're just like, sick snakes and strobe lights." The upcoming vault tracks for Reputation will be, quote, fire, she promises. The re-recordings project feels like a mythical quest to her. "I'm collecting Horcruxes," she says. "I'm collecting Infinity Stones. Gandalf's voice is in my head every time I put out a new one. For me, it is a movie now." So I included that quote here because I thought it was interesting that she tried to define Reputation as a goth punk moment. I don't know that she understands exactly what those genre classifications mean because like I wouldn't classify Reputation in that way. And then also, yeah, just the Horcruxes thing is a little bit just kind of cringy. Yeah. Some of my other thoughts about Reputation, the album itself, some of the EDM influences to the production just don't really seem to fit her songwriting. And obviously that EDM influence helps us understand that the goth punk comment doesn't really align with what's actually happening in the album. It feels sometimes like she's trying to capitalize on some of the celebrity beef that she was embroiled in at the time. And I don't at all discount the pain that she was experiencing at that time in her life, but I would expect that to lead to something more than repeatedly singing, quote, "light me up" before the beat drops.
Oh my God, I can't.
Probably the best song on Reputation to me is Delicate, because it appears to draw like most closely from her real life. Maybe this links up with stuff with Whitney Hanson as well, so maybe we can talk about that more. But Delicate isn't as weighed down with the overdone metaphors and similes that I have talked about. So, and honorable mention to New Year's Day, which she seems to sort of connect to in Midnights. That is something I also sort of admire about her work, is the making the connections across time and space between her different albums. Sometimes it can be a little heavy-handed, but I respect, the thought process behind connecting all of these. Like, my younger self wrote this thing, and now I'm pulling that thread into the stuff that I'm writing now. So, and then aside from her actual work itself, there's other things, other parts of her celebrity-dom that I take issue with. There's also issues of her keeping other women artists out multiple times now of the #1 spot on the charts by dropping like new special renditions of the exact same material when those artists dropped their albums.
I didn't know that she did that.
Yeah, there have been a couple tweets, discussing she did this with Charli XCX's album release, and I think Billie Eilish's album release as well. So these other young women, I mean, Charli's been working as long as Taylor has. So she not very supportive of other women artists because she wants to be at the top always. And then Derek G, another person I love to hear from on TikTok. He's like a music commentator. He likens the way Taylor Swift moves to dunking on people at the end of a basketball game when you've already won the game. He was saying this in reference to when Taylor Swift accepted her album of the year at the Grammys and then used that as a moment to announce the Tortured Poets Department. So, yeah. Yes. Now I have said all the things that I wanted to say.
Yes. I wanted to say something like about the commentary on celebrity, because I feel like, was the Nanny and Hunger Games, is that our first episode or is that the second one? Because that's where we started with like the idea of celebrity, and like now we're like ending there. And maybe this like ties to Whitney Hanson too, but like, I know we both said we don't have any interest in celebrity. I really don't. But then when I see both of them where they have like this huge following, Whitney Hanson is like not a celebrity, but they have this huge following, and whatever they put out, like people are just going to buy and consume whether it's good or not. And that's another reason why I do not want to be a celebrity, because I still want to be held to a standard, of like critical standard of like, I want the work I put out to be good. And I feel like once you reach a certain status, it doesn't matter what you put out anymore. It could just be anything.
Yeah.
And then you've deluded yourself in thinking that it's good too, because everyone buys it, so
true.
Or you win awards because it benefits the whole system. So
yep. I definitely think that some of Taylor Swift's best songs are the ones that are much closer to her personal experience. She's written some on like Folklore and Evermore that are very like almost like persona poem-esque of fully adopting another character in order to write a song. Do you notice at all like whether Whitney only seems to draw from her own life, or were there moments where she does more persona? I don't know. What's her vibe?
I know. Well, I will admit that I haven't read a collection of hers like from beginning to end. And I don't feel like I need to in order to have a strong opinion of dislike of her work. I don't think she does. Like the ones where, I don't know, like I feel like a lot of the work that I've read, they don't delve that deep into this like nitty gritty specific moment in her life. They're more of like, you've lost someone who's lost someone loves with the fire I don't know. It's like just this like really cringy stuff that's like says like big statements, but doesn't give us all the meat that led to that big statement. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, okay, I don't disagree, but can you tell me more about that big important relationship in your life that totally devastated your heart? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Like, even for example, just who is the you in your poem, you know? Like, who
Yes.
did you connect with in this moment, or who are you feeling disconnect with? Because that changes the poem entirely. I also noticed too about Whitney Hanson that I have mad respect for her marketing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But she's been able to market like a journal that is like mostly, you know, just pages that you fill in, but there's like these little quotes at the top. And so she's created something that she probably didn't have to do a whole lot to create. And now she's just able to market it because like she has this social media presence, and she'll sell it to people, and people will be like, well, this is a cool journal, or like, I'll give this to my friend, kind of thing. And I respect the hustle, but
Same.
in terms of like creating something meaningful, like, can you really do that when it's mostly just like empty lines on the page? And like, for example, this one page says, in English, we say, I miss you. In poetry, we say, and then it's a colon. So then
Oh, yeah.
people can fill it in from there.
Okay, but that is taken from one of her poems that she read on her Instagram. I've heard her read that one.
Oh, okay. So she's like repurposing
things
similar to Taylor Swift. Of like, if I just change the format, if I just add a few little things here, make it exclusive, add a new set of photography to this album, then people will eat it up. They got to have all the different versions of it. Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you, any Taylor Swift that you like?
So I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but I will say that there are songs that you hear over and over again, and they really start to wear you down. And so, yeah, there's a few. Like, there's that song, Calm Down, like, you need to calm down. Catchy song. And then what's another one? Oh, let me find it. Anti-Hero, very catchy song. I would say those would probably be the two that come to mind. And I want to go back to that moment that you highlighted about her using the Grammys to announce her new album, which, by the way, I have to say that album title, Tortured Poets Department, is, I think, among the worst album names ever. So I'll give her that accolade.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I feel like I have to respect her, though, for using every moment that's supposed to be a business's moment to like steal it for herself. Like, that's really just business. I don't want to say genius, but just like, she's just very business smart of like just capitalizing on opportunities where it's like, no, this is like the Grammys. And it's like, no, this is her moment where she's going to use it to take their audience that may not be tuning in for her. Just, you know, I don't know. Like, I respect that, but I don't think she's the one that's like making all of those decisions, you know, like there's like, it's like a whole industry behind her, you know, where she's just like part of the machine.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know like who's on her marketing team, sort of thing. And I also, it does feel like so disrespectful to the other, like, even nominees for that award as well, of just like, haha, like, I won, you didn't, so now I'm going to, like, she was planning to do that. She was like, I know I'm going to win this award, and then I'm going to say that my album is going to be out on stage.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing about her, is that I feel like so what I love about hip hop music and like hip hop artists in general is that they own their persona, their braggadociousness. Like, that's a whole part of their persona and their game. And like, that's what I respect about it, right? Taylor Swift pretends to not be a monster in that way. Like she pretends to be this like super grateful and this super like false humility. Like, dude, I'm sorry, you didn't get to that position without being like a dog. And that's why people eat her up, is that she's just, oh, I'm just so grateful. Like, oh my God, I'm just so humbled. It's like, bitch, no. You, like you were saying, like you knew you were going to win and you cashed in on it big time for yourself, which I respect it, but you pretend to not be like that. And that's what I don't respect.
Yeah, it's like it's just inauthentic. Like if you're trying to be the greatest in the world, then just like actually try, because then we might get things that are really amazing and thought-provoking from her more if she's like, in order to be on top of my game, like I have to be on top of my game. But the thing is that she doesn't, also because she just has the sheer numbers.
Yep. I think Whitney Hanson is different in that way. Like, I don't feel like Whitney Hanson is like gross celebrity at all. I think that this is just like my own observation of Whitney Hanson. Like, I don't think that she's coming from as gross of a place, like from a business perspective. I think that she believes in the work that she's doing, and just like hustled hard at it, like, and just, so now I'm like, I feel bad comparing them because like they're gross in different ways. I feel like Whitney didn't develop as much as in her craft.
Yeah, and she still has the potential to, like, for her, like, this is probably just the beginning. She's only 3 books in, so there's always potential for growth to happen over time, especially as like we get older and like experience more life. And maybe she has other poets in her life that are giving her the type of feedback that she needs. I would hope.
I hope. That's my issue with her. It just seems like, I don't know, the writing just doesn't seem developed, or that it's like coming from like craft inspired place.
I was gonna say as well, like Whitney Hanson is not the only person that I've seen like sort of create similar poetry in this way. Like there are other people who started out like on YouTube. Gabby Hanna, I don't know if you're familiar with her at all, but she is also, even like her books look very similar. With the illustrations on the front of like a girl. Maybe you'll want to look into her later, because she also has an interesting trajectory. And then we've also talked about like Rupi Kaur as well.
I know.
Having things that are very like digestible. And I would say I have respect too for writing things that people can connect with. Like they're doing something here that people can connect with. So even just like a slight turn in a direction of adding a bit more of that specificity that, starts to actually give people an idea of the difference between you and them too, so that they learn things from you, would be really cool. The whole reason that we wanted to talk about Taylor Swift and Whitney Hanson is,
I feel like a lot of our podcast has been spotlighting women and women's different experiences and lives, things that are like often overlooked or not included in conversations or experiences that you see stories about or art about.
We tried with our podcast to prioritize women a lot and prioritize women who are frequently marginalized, bring them to the center, and say like, this is an artist that I love that you might not know about. And part of why those artists might not be known or heard as much is that people often feel drawn to things that are easy to listen to, easy to read, that make them feel warm and gooey inside, and there's totally a place for that. But I think it's definitely been a good mission for us to say, let's keep digging deeper. Like we literally say, let's dig in. Let's dig in, What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I feel like there is an audience there, like there is that there are people who do appreciate that more in-depth work. And I feel like that's where I personally have felt the most alive in engaging in work that does dig deep. I don't know, like crack something open in me. And it's like in my own journey as like a writer and an artist, like it's granted permission for me to then also like dig deep in my own life. And then also it's been like aspirational too. Like, wow, like this work was like really stunning, like how can I get on that level, I guess
Yeah.
there's always a place for simple, but I don't think it's going to it hasn't nourished me in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the things that I continue to carry with me. Sure, I have nostalgia for Taylor Swift's Fearless from back in the day, and I have positive memories around it. But the things that, help me dissect what's going on in here in my heart are like things that are different than that, that have a lot more depth and a lot more, like grit to it, like you were saying, of like, I can really see that this person is being like truly vulnerable and like opening up all of these things. And I think Whitney Hanson is trying to do that with her work too, of like she is drawing from some very difficult experiences in her life in order to write her work. I guess our qualm with her is just that she has potential to do a lot more with that and to like get more specific.
I hope she does. That's my hope
Yeah.
for her. I feel like she's young enough in her career. She will have a long career and that she will develop that.
Thanks for listening to today's episode about Whitney Hanson's poetry and Taylor Swift's music. Please check out our website at the link in the description for more information about this episode. If you have feedback or pairing that you're dying for us to talk about in the future, you can send us a message over on our website as well, or go follow us on Instagram at Juxtapose Podcast. Thanks for listening, and adios for now.